Sam was in a conference room with a whiteboard that still had yesterday's strategy scribbled on it. His boss was smiling, customers were happy, and the roadmap looked safe. Then the intern said one sentence that made the whole room go quiet. What if the cheap version wins? Because it sounded ridiculous. And that's exactly how the next wave usually starts, as a joke that turns into a funeral. The book that explains this better than anything else is The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. You're going to learn why great companies fail even when they do everything right, what disruptive innovation actually is, how it sneaks in from the bottom, and the practical rules leaders can use to survive it. This covers every major chapter, so by the end, you'll have the full picture. Sam used to believe failure looked like incompetence. Bad products, lazy teams, blind executives. Christensen's point is colder than that. Failure often looks like excellence. It looks like listening to your best customers. It looks like improving margins. It looks like focusing on the biggest opportunities. It looks like investing in the highest performance. And that's the trap. Because when disruption shows up, the very habits that made you strong make you slow, proud, and predictable. Now pay attention to this because it connects everything we're about to cover. Disruption is not new technology is better. It is new technology is different. It usually starts out worse on the things your best customers care about. It is simpler, cheaper, lower performance on the traditional metrics, lower margins, smaller markets, and the annoying use cases. That is why serious companies ignore it. And that is why it grows. Think of it like a tiny crack in a dam. When you first see it, it looks harmless. You can even joke about it. But water does not negotiate. And then one day, the whole wall collapses. Christensen opens the book with a place where this pattern was painfully clear. Hard disk drives. The disk drive industry moved through waves of new architectures, bigger to smaller, higher capacity to not enough. Each wave looked inferior to the customers who mattered at the time, not because the leaders were dumb, but because the leaders were disciplined. Here's why that matters. Most managers are trained to do two things. 1, listen closely to customers. 2, invest where the numbers are biggest and the returns are clearest. Those are not bad ideas. Those ideas build great companies. But disruptive innovations poison those ideas because disruption begins where your best customers are not. If your best customer says, "I don't want that lower performance thing," you are doing your job when you listen. If your finance team says, "That small market cannot move our revenue needle," you are doing your job when you say no. That is the dilemma. You cannot do the right thing for the current business and the right thing for the future business using the same logic. Sam learned this the hard way in a small way first. He worked at a software company that sold a premium product to large businesses. Their biggest clients loved custom features, long contracts, and white glove support. The team measured success by renewal rates and upsells. Then a weird competitor appeared. And the competitor's product looked childish. It had fewer features, it broke sometimes, and it cost almost nothing. Sam's sales team mocked it in meetings. That's a toy. But then Sam saw something odd. A mid-level manager at a big client started using the cheap tool under the radar. Not the executives, not procurement, just the people doing the work. It spread like a rumor. That is disruption's favorite doorway, the overlooked user. Disruption often starts at the low end of the market where customers are overserved by existing products, or in a new market where people who could not use the old product can now do something for the first time. And that idea alone flips the way you look at competition. Because your next competitor might not be trying to take your best customers today. They might be building a ladder from below. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, but if the disruptive product is worse, why would anyone buy it? People do not buy products in a vacuum. They buy products inside a value network. A value network is the context that defines what good means. It includes customers, competitors, profit models, distribution, costs, and expectations. In one value network, good might mean maximum performance at any price. In another, good might mean simple, small, and cheap. And they die when they assume the future value network will reward the same things. It's like training for the wrong sport. You can become the strongest swimmer in the world, but that strength does not automatically win you a marathon. Same athlete. different game. In the disk drive story, established firms kept improving disk drive performance because their best customers demanded it. That was sustaining innovation. Sustaining innovation makes good products better along the dimensions mainstream customers already value. Disruptive innovation is the opposite. It changes the dimensions of competition and still win because it is winning a different race. But Christensen then takes the pattern out of disk drives and drops it into a completely different industry, mechanical excavators. This is where the book stops being a tech story and becomes a law of nature. Cable excavators were powerful, established machines. Then hydraulic excavators emerged. Early hydraulics were weaker on traditional performance. They were not what the big customers wanted. So the leading cable excavator makers did what great managers do. They listened. They focused on their best customers. They kept improving cable machines. Meanwhile, the hydraulics found footholds in markets where their unique strengths mattered more than their weaknesses. Then hydraulics improved. The performance trajectory climbed. Eventually, hydraulics became good enough for the mainstream, and the leaders were trapped. They were not trapped because they did not see hydraulics. They were trapped because the hydraulics did not fit the incentives of their current business. Now, stay with me here, because this is the part most people get completely wrong. Most people think disruption is about vision. They think the winners saw the future. Christensen says winners often did not see the future either. They simply had a structure that allowed them to learn it. That is a huge difference, because if disruption's future market is unclear, you cannot plan your way into it. You have to discover your way into it. Small experiments with uncertain payoff. Sam felt that tension when his company finally noticed the cheap competitor growing. He brought the data into a leadership meeting. Usage was rising in small teams. Adoption was happening without procurement. They were tiny accounts and internal departments that never bought premium. Sam thought the obvious move was to build a cheaper version. He expected applause. Instead, the finance lead asked one question that crushed the room. How does that help us hit our revenue target this quarter? That question was not evil. It was logical. It was responsible. It was also lethal. Because disruption doesn't show up as a giant deal. It shows up as a bunch of small wins that look like distractions. Christensen turns that into a principle. Small markets do not solve the growth needs of large companies. A large organization needs big outcomes to justify attention. A disruptive innovation needs time, patience, and permission to be small. That is why disruption is so often led by entrants. Entrants can live on small markets. Our entrants celebrate small wins. Entrants can survive low margins because their cost structures are different. And that leads to another brutal point Christensen makes. The idea of just invest in it is not enough. Because investment decisions are not made in a vacuum either. They are made through resource allocation processes. In most companies, resources flow toward things that promise profit, growth, and customer demand. That means disruptive projects naturally starve. Not because executives hate them, but because the organization's muscle memory sends food to the biggest, safest opportunities. It's like trying to grow a rare plant in the shadow of a massive oak tree. The oak takes the light. It takes the water. It does not do that out of malice. It does it because that's what big trees do. So Christensen says the real question isn't, should we do disruption? The real question is, where can disruption live without being killed by our own success? This is where the book shifts from diagnosing the disease to prescribing the cure, until you realize how much they fight your instincts. One principle is resource dependence. In well-run companies, customers shape what gets funded. The loudest customers, the most profitable customers, the customers who pay your bills, they indirectly control your roadmap. That is normally a strength. But with disruption, your best customers often cannot use the disruptive product early on. They do not want it. They may even be offended by it. So if you rely on your best customers to guide innovation, you will keep investing in sustaining improvements. You will keep climbing up market. You will keep making the product better for the high end. And you will open a gap at the low end. Christensen calls this a tendency to move up market. Companies chase higher margins and higher performance, and they leave the simplest, cheapest tiers behind. That is where disruption takes root. Think of it like a fancy restaurant that keeps raising prices and adding complex dishes. The regulars love it, the critics praise it, Then a simple food truck shows up with a small menu, fast service, and low prices. At first, it seems irrelevant. Then the food truck gets better, while the restaurant wonders why foot traffic is down. The restaurant did not fail at cooking. It failed at understanding the value network shift. Christensen then builds on another idea. Markets have performance trajectories. Technologies improve over time. Often they improve faster than customers' ability to use the added performance. That creates overshoot. When customers are overserved, they start valuing different attributes. They stop paying for more performance. They start paying for convenience, simplicity, reliability, and price. That is the moment disruption loves most. Because a disruptive product's early strengths often match those new priorities. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most companies believe the only direction is up. Better performance, bigger customers, higher margins. Christensen's chapter called "What Goes Up Can't Go Down" points at a painful truth. It is hard for a successful company to move down market. Your cost structure won't allow it. Your sales model won't allow it. Your brand won't allow it. Your processes and values won't allow it. Even your best people won't allow it because they are trained to win in the current game. So when leaders say, "Let's launch a cheaper version," they often fail because they try to build the cheaper version using expensive processes. It's like trying to make budget sneakers in a luxury boutique. The rent alone kills you. And this is why Christensen keeps repeating the same theme in different words. The organization itself is the constraint. That leads into the practical chapters where he starts saying, here is what to do. One of the most important prescriptions is this: give responsibility for disruptive technologies to organizations whose customers need them. That is a mouthful, but the idea is sharp. If you put a disruptive project in the mainstream organization, the mainstream customers will reject it. The mainstream sales force will ignore it. The mainstream managers will starve it. The mainstream metrics will declare it a failure. But if you place it with a group whose customers are pulling it, the project gets oxygen, it gets feedback, it gets resources. Not because someone believes by Ticho, but because demand creates momentum. Sam saw this play out when leadership finally approved a small pilot team. They called it an innovation pod. But it sounded exciting. It got a cool internal logo. People clapped. They asked the core enterprise sales team to sell the cheap product. Nobody sold it. The sales reps were paid on large deals. Their calendars were full of high-value accounts. A small, cheap product was not worth their time, so the pilot looked like a failure. Until he did one thing differently. He found a completely different group to target. Not the enterprise buyers, small teams, departments with tiny budgets, people who wanted speed more than perfection. Those customers did not demand long feature lists. They demanded simplicity. They demanded quick setup. They demanded affordability. Suddenly, adoption happened. The product didn't magically become better overnight. The value network changed. Christensen then makes the second prescription brutally clear. Match the size of the organization to the size of the market. If the market is small, the organization must be small enough to care. A disruptive market often starts as a rounding error. If you put it inside a division that needs massive revenue, the first honest spreadsheet kills it. So you create a small unit that can win small. This is not about isolation for the sake of secrecy. It is about survival. A small unit measures differently. It celebrates early traction. It can pivot without politics. It can learn without being mocked. Think of it like teaching a kid to ride a bike. You do not throw them onto a highway and say, "Good luck." You give them a quiet street, training wheels, a safe space to wobble. Disruption needs training wheels. The next prescription gets even more uncomfortable: discovering new and emerging markets. Christensen argues you cannot analyze your way into disruptive markets because the market does not fully exist yet. The data you want is not there, so you have to act, learn, and iterate. That your initial plan will be wrong, but that's not weakness. That is realism. That if you treat early disruption like a learning process, then failure becomes information. This is why Christensen's model is so helpful. It does not ask you to predict the future. It asks you to build a system that can find it. Now, if you only remember one thing from this video, make it this next part. Christensen separates capabilities from people. Most companies think capabilities live in talented individuals. Hire better people, and you can do anything. Christensen says capabilities mostly live in processes and values. Processes are how you do work. Values are how you decide what matters. And sticky. They are the reason you can execute reliably at scale. They are also the reason you struggle to do anything new that conflicts with the old model. So when you ask a mainstream organization to build a disruptive product, you're not just asking for effort, you are asking it to violate its own identity. That is why it fails. This is why Christensen says disruptive innovation often requires an autonomous organization. Not because your people are bad, but because your processes and values are optimized for a different game. Sam watched this in a meeting that still makes him cringe. The small team built a lightweight version of their product. It was fast. It was simple. Early users liked it. Then the enterprise team reviewed it and said, "This isn't secure enough. It doesn't integrate enough. We need more controls." Those requests sounded responsible. They were also the beginning of death. If the cheap product is forced to satisfy enterprise standards too early, it becomes expensive, slow, and bloated. It stops being disruptive. And then it loses to the real disruptor anyway. That is why Christensen's advice is not build a cheaper version. It is build a different system for a different market. Then Christensen moves into a chapter that ties technology to demand, performance provided, market demand, and the product lifecycle. Here he explains that customers care about different attributes at different stages. Early in a market, performance and functionality matter. Customers are hungry for something that works at all. Later, when products become good enough, customers shift to reliability, then convenience, then price. When that shift happens, disruption can explode because a simpler product that is good enough can win on convenience and price, until it suddenly looks like the obvious choice. And then Christensen closes the main body with a case study style application, managing disruptive technological change. He uses the principles to show how leaders can assess new technology and avoid the trap of asking the wrong questions. Most leaders ask, can this technology outperform our current product? Disruption laughs at that question. The better question is, who would value this technology's current strengths, even if it is weak on our traditional metrics? And then, can we build a business model and an organization that can thrive serving those customers? That is how disruption becomes manageable. Not easy, not painless, but understandable. Now, let's pull this into one clear mental model you can carry. There are sustaining innovations, where you improve for your best customers. That is your current engine. And there are disruptive innovations, where you build something different for different customers. That is your future engine. The danger is when leaders try to run both engines using one set of rules, because the rules conflict. Sustaining rewards big deals, clear forecasts, and high margins. Disruption rewards learning, small wins, and patience. Sustaining wants precision. Disruption wants adaptability. Sustaining wants your best customers. Disruption often starts with customers you currently ignore. You do not just miss an opportunity, you create your own blind spot. Sam ended up having a private moment with his boss after the pilot finally showed real traction. His boss said, "I don't get it. We didn't ignore the competitor. We talked about them for months." Sam nodded because he finally understood. Seeing is not the same as acting. Talking is not the same as building. The company saw the disruptor, but it could not justify responding inside the current value network. That was the trap. The organization was doing exactly what it was designed to do, a rule that applies even if you are not a CEO. Whenever you see something that looks worse but simpler and cheaper, do not ask, "Is it good?" Ask, "Who would love this right now?" Then watch what happens. Because disruption usually does not begin with excellence. It begins with fit. Now, here are 4 things you can start doing right now based on what we just covered. First, train your brain to separate sustaining from disruptive. When you evaluate a new idea, label it in your mind. If it is sustaining, judge it by your current customers and metrics. If it is disruptive, stop forcing it to pass the same tests. Instead, ask where it could be useful today, even if it is not impressive by your current standards. Second, Hunt for overserved customers. Look for people who complain that products are too complex, too expensive, or packed with features they do not use. They are signals that performance has overshot demand. When demand shifts towards simplicity and convenience, a disruptive opening is forming. Third, build a small experiment habit. Do not wait for certainty. Choose one tiny test you can run fast. The goal is not to win big immediately. The goal is to learn what kind of customer pulls the product out of your hands. If you are a team leader, protect that test from being smothered by big company expectations. If you are an individual, protect that test from your own perfectionism. Fourth, redesign incentives around learning when you are exploring disruption. If everyone is rewarded only for large outcomes and short-term revenue, disruptive ideas will die in the meeting where they first appear. You need at least one place where small wins count, where iteration is celebrated, and where early failure is not treated like a moral flaw. Christensen's whole point is that uncertainty is not a sign you are doing it wrong. Uncertainty is the terrain. You either build for it or it builds your competitor. That's it for this video. I hope it was useful and gave you something real to think about. Thanks for watching and have a great day.